My mom uninvited me from Christmas because I was bad energy, then their dinner was canceled when they realized I wasn't coming. My parents uninvited me from Christmas because, according to my mom, my brother's fiancée didn't want me there. She doesn't want you around. Bad energy, my mother said. I just replied, understood. What they didn't know was that I ended up spending Christmas in Jackson Hole on a $52,000 ski trip, and I posted exactly one photo. Then, on Christmas morning at 12:34 p.m., my mom called me. The dinner had been canceled because apparently nobody could afford to host it anymore. I remember looking at my phone and thinking, why would that be my problem? My name is Ethan. I'm 35, and I sell houses that people save to Pinterest boards under names like Dream Home and tell themselves they'll own someday. I live in Seattle while my family lives in a suburb outside Cincinnati. 4 weeks before Christmas, my mother called me and uninvited me from the family celebration. She didn't hesitate, clear her throat, or even pretend the conversation would be difficult. Your brother's fiancé doesn't want you there. Bad energy, she said, almost like she was reading something off a grocery list. I just sat there staring at the wall of my living room, looking at a framed picture from the previous Christmas. In that photo, I was standing beside the stove wearing an apron, carving the turkey I'd paid for in the house whose mortgage I had quietly been helping cover. I swallowed hard and said, understood. That was it. I didn't argue, beg, or ask what I had supposedly done wrong. I gave her one word, and then she hung up sounding relieved, like she had finally checked the hardest item off her holiday to-do list. They assumed I would absorb the insult the same way I had absorbed everything else over the years. What they didn't realize was that the $52,000 I had just spent on a last-minute Christmas trip to Jackson Hole was less than I had spent supporting them over the previous year. And they definitely had no idea about the PDF sitting quietly in my drafts folder, labeled Family Support, effective December 5th. Because when Christmas morning finally arrived, my family group FaceTime had 41 people watching my mother cry on camera. And for the first time in my life, I didn't scramble to fix anything. I didn't grovel. I didn't apologize. I sent them the file. Hours later, when they finally opened it and actually read what was inside, everything changed. Growing up, the family dynamic was pretty simple. Ryan was the son, and I was expected to orbit around him. Ryan is my younger brother by 4 years. He was the surprise baby. I was the kid everyone joked had made them parents before they were ready. That difference showed up early, usually in small ways that didn't seem important by themselves, but somehow always left another little cut. When I turned 8, Mom forgot the theme for my birthday party. I'd been talking about dinosaurs for months. I wanted dinosaur plates, a dinosaur cake, dinosaur decorations, the whole thing. Instead, I came home from school to find a table covered in generic balloons and a cake that simply said, "Happy birthday, boys." Because my birthday happened to be close enough to Ryan's. 3 weeks later, Ryan got his own party. Spider-Man decorations, a custom cake, 25 kids, and apparently enough effort to make it obvious whose birthday actually mattered. When I asked Mom why my name had been squeezed onto a cake that mostly celebrated Ryan, she just shrugged. Ethan, be flexible. I learned pretty early that in my family, be flexible usually meant be invisible. When I was 16, I received a partial scholarship to a summer architecture program at a college I had only ever seen in movies. I brought the acceptance letter to my parents at the kitchen table, trying not to look too excited, even though I was practically vibrating inside. Dad skimmed the first page, nodded, and gave me a distracted, "Yeah, impressive, son." Mom's eyes moved to the second page where the cost was listed. This still costs money. We're not made of it. Right at that moment, Ryan walked into the kitchen, tossing a basketball from one hand to the other. "Can I still do the AAU camp?" he asked. Mom looked between us and gestured with my scholarship letter like it was evidence in an argument. "That's my point. We can't do everything." 10 days later, Ryan left for basketball camp with brand new shoes, new gear, and a packed duffel bag. My architecture program application sat buried beneath a stack of mail on the kitchen counter until the deadline passed. When Mom noticed the look on my face, she leaned toward me and whispered, "Ethan, don't make a scene. Be flexible. There'll be other chances." There weren't, so instead, I started working at a local real estate office after school. When college came around, I stayed in state because I needed to keep the costs down. Ryan went out of state with a combination of loans, a small scholarship, and the kind of confidence you develop when you grow up knowing you'll usually be the one people choose first. I got my real estate license at 21 and started hustling. Open houses, rentals, listings, whatever I could get my hands on. At 26, I closed my first 7-figure home sale. I was proud of myself, so I took a picture holding the keys and sent it to the family group chat. Mom responded with a thumbs up emoji. 8 minutes later, she sent me a private message. Could you help us a little with the mortgage? She asked. We're only behind for a few months. Dad had lost hours at work and Ryan had just torn his ACL. The situation sounded reasonable and I didn't think twice. Of course, I typed back. Those few months eventually turned into years. I refinanced their house under a structure my attorney recommended, with my name quietly added to the deed while my parents remained life tenants. It protected them from foreclosure and, technically, it meant the house would eventually belong to me. My attorney looked at the paperwork and warned me, don't explain all the details unless you want World War III. So I didn't. I simply added their mortgage, property taxes, and insurance payments to my autopay and kept moving. Whenever I visited, Mom would gush about how responsible I was with money, sometimes handing me a grocery list while saying, Ethan, you're so good with this stuff. You'll make it back in no time. And every time I told myself the same thing, be flexible, be invisible. By the time I hit my late 20s, being invisible had evolved into being useful. I became the family's unofficial event planner, emergency fund, and ATM all rolled into one. For Thanksgiving, I bought the turkey, the sides, the extra folding chairs, and the expensive wine nobody wanted to admit they liked. At Christmas, I paid for catering so Mom wouldn't have to stress, bought matching pajamas for her Instagram photos, and even covered Ryan's flights whenever he and whatever girlfriend he happened to be dating were going through one of their transitions. One year, I booked an entire cabin for the family. It was non-refundable, naturally. Nobody asked how much it cost. They just asked whether the place had Wi-Fi. And when Ryan got engaged to Claire, I even helped them find their starter condo from several states away. We did virtual tours of the condos together. I negotiated a lower purchase price, got some of the closing costs waived, and then wired them $40,000 for the down payment. At their engagement party, Ryan slapped me on the back and said, "Dude, you're a lifesaver." Claire smiled at me, showing every tooth, and added, "You're so generous, Ethan." For about half a second, I actually wondered if something had changed. Maybe this was finally the point where I stopped being the invisible brother and started being someone they genuinely appreciated. Then later that night, I heard Claire talking to Mom in the kitchen. I was standing close enough to hear them, but far enough away that they clearly thought I couldn't. "I just worry he's going to make it about him," Claire said. "He has this vibe sometimes, like he thinks he's above us." Mom immediately tried to calm her down. "Ryan is the one getting married. We'll make sure it's his day. Ethan knows how to be flexible." I stood there in the hallway, holding a tray full of empty champagne glasses, and something finally clicked for me. I wasn't even part of the background anymore. I was just a useful piece of lighting that everyone was happy to have around until someone decided I was too bright. The final straw came at Thanksgiving, 5 weeks before that Christmas phone call. I had taken a red-eye flight into town, rented an SUV, picked up Aunt Diane from the airport because Uncle hated driving at night, and then walked into my parents' house with my bag still in my hand. Mom was sitting at the dining table with a stack of catering menus spread out in front of her. "What's all this?" I asked as I dropped my bag. "Oh, don't worry about it," she said. "We're just trying to find a catering package that's, reasonable since we're doing Christmas big this year." I paused for a second. "Okay, what's the budget?" She looked at me like I had somehow missed the obvious. "Well, that depends on what you think is fair." And there it was. She didn't actually ask me to pay. She didn't need to. The expectation was already sitting between us. So, like I always did, I covered most of the cost. I ordered extra food too because Mom liked sending leftovers home with people and calling it being a proper hostess. After dinner, I was loading the dishwasher when Ryan wandered into the kitchen with a beer in his hand. "Claire says thanks," he said, "for the whole spread." Then he smirked. "She says you really know how to show off." I straightened up. "Show off? Dude, relax." He laughed. "I'm kidding. You know how you are." I looked at him. "How I am." He took another drink, shrugged, and leaned against the counter. "You always have to go overboard. It's fine. It's your thing. Big Mac energy." I laughed on cue because that's what I had always done. I turned the knife in my chest into a joke so nobody else had to feel uncomfortable. But later that night, lying on the lumpy guest bed and staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about one question. If I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone actually miss me? Or would they only notice the payments that stopped showing up? The Christmas uninvite came the following week. I was sitting in my car between showings in Bellevue with a light layer of snow collecting on the windshield when Mom's contact photo appeared on my screen. It was an old picture of her from 5 years earlier, holding a glass of wine with her cheeks flushed from the heat. "Hey, Mom," I answered. She skipped the hello entirely. So, she began, and I could tell immediately that she had rehearsed what she was about to say. I talked to Ryan and Claire about Christmas. My stomach tightened. Okay, she sighed. Well, Claire feels like your energy is a little too much right now with everything they have going on. The wedding planning, the budget. You know how sensitive she is. I stared through the windshield at the wreath hanging on the front door of the house I was about to show. What does that mean? I asked. There was a pause, and when Mom finally answered, I could hear the strain in her voice. It means your brother's fiancé doesn't want you there. Bad energy. Then she rushed to soften it. We just want a peaceful Christmas. No tension, no drama. You understand, right? You're always so flexible. Once upon a time, that would have been the moment I started bargaining like I was negotiating for my life. I would have offered to tone myself down, leave early, pay for everything, or whatever else would make them comfortable. But this time, something inside me simply snapped into place. Understood, I said. Mom went quiet, clearly thrown off by the answer. Understood? Yeah, I said. You don't want me there, I hear you. No, honey, it's not that we don't want. I have to go, I interrupted. I'm walking into a showing. Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk later. Love you. You too, I said automatically and ended the call. I sat there in the quiet car with the heater humming, both hands resting on the Then I started shaking, and it wasn't because I was sad. It was because for the first time, I could see everything clearly. Be flexible, be invisible, or stop. That night, instead of looking for flights to Cincinnati, I opened a new browser tab and searched for luxury ski resorts in Jackson Hole at Christmas. The first package I found cost $52,000, and even I had to stare at the number for a second. It included 6 nights in a suite at a 5-star hotel, lift passes, ski lessons, spa credits, and Christmas Day dinner. It was ridiculously expensive, even by my standards. I booked it anyway. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a long second. This is insane, I thought. Then another thought came in, colder and much sharper. This year alone, I had covered around $65,000 of their expenses, and somehow I was the one being labeled bad energy. I clicked confirm. My phone buzzed almost immediately. It was Aunt Diane. I heard something about Christmas adjustments. You okay? I stared at the message for a moment before typing back, Me? I'm fine. I'm making other plans. She replied with a single heart emoji. Then another message appeared. Good. You've done enough, Ethan. The next day, I got my attorney Marcus on the phone. I need to stop all the informal support, I told him. But I don't want them homeless or blindsided. I just need everything documented and clear. We had talked about this possibility before. The same way people casually talk about wills over coffee and then never actually do anything about them. This time, though, I was serious. Okay, Marcus said. We'll formalize everything. We'll put an effective date on it. You're not their bank, Ethan. You've been generous. There's a difference. We went through everything line by line. The mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, even the holiday fund I had created to pay for big family gatherings so Mom could feel like Martha Stewart without having to foot the bill herself. The automatic payments would stop on December 5th. We drafted a letter to my parents explaining that I would no longer provide ongoing financial support and giving them a 75-day window to refinance the house or sell it if they couldn't handle the expenses on their own. We attached a detailed summary covering 6 years of payments, including dates, amounts, holidays, and emergency expenses. Marcus gave the document a completely neutral title, Notice of Change in Financial Support. At the top of my personal copy, though, I added one line in bold just for myself. This isn't revenge. This is a boundary. Then I saved the whole thing as a PDF and named the file Family Support effective December 5th. I didn't send it yet. The weeks leading up to Christmas were quieter than any holiday season I could remember. Normally, my phone would be buzzing nonstop with lists from Mom, links from Ryan, and endless, can you just requests piling up like snowdrifts. This year, my notifications were mostly clients, along with a few, are you coming home? Texts from cousins who clearly hadn't gotten the memo yet. I wrapped gifts anyway, but they weren't for my parents, Ryan or Claire. They were for me. I bought the watch I'd wanted for years, an absolutely ridiculous cashmere sweater, and a brand new pair of skis. I had the store wrap everything and put to Ethan from Ethan on the tags. If I was going to spend Christmas alone, I figured I might as well commit to the joke. Packing for Jackson Hole felt strangely symbolic, almost like I was preparing for a field trip into a completely different version of my life. I packed thermal layers, gloves, the cashmere sweater, and a slim black suit in case I needed something nicer for dinner. The night before my flight, my phone lit up with a notification from the family group chat. Mom had posted a picture of my parents standing in front of a half-decorated Christmas tree with the caption, Can't wait for Christmas. There was no mention of me anywhere. Ryan commented, it's going to be the best one yet, followed by a ring emoji and a champagne bottle. Claire added, so excited for cozy family vibes. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Somewhere in the back of my mind, that old family script started whispering again. Be flexible. I closed the chat and opened my email instead. The recipient line read, Mom, Dad, with Aunt Diane copied in. The subject was Notice of Change in Financial Support, effective December 5th. My finger hovered over the send button. Then I stopped. Not yet. I didn't want to send it as a preemptive strike. If I was going to send that document, I wanted it to be an answer, not an attack. Christmas Eve in Jackson Hole felt like I had somehow wandered onto the set of a movie I wasn't supposed to be in. The snow came down slowly, almost perfectly. The kind of snow you see in commercials where nobody ever has to shovel a driveway. The hotel lobby smelled like fresh pine and expensive candles. Couples in matching sweaters were taking selfies beside a 10-foot Christmas tree, laughing like they had never experienced a family argument in their lives. I checked in, tipped the bellhop far more than I needed to, and eventually stood alone in my suite, listening to muffled laughter coming through the walls. That was when the grief finally caught up with me. It wasn't grief over missing Christmas at my parents' house because, if I was being honest, that holiday had never really felt like mine anyway. I was grieving all the years I had spent auditioning for a role in a family play where my only lines were, sure, I can pay for that, and no worries, I'll figure it out. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Mom. I stared at her name until the screen went dark again. No voicemail, of course. She had either hung up before leaving one or decided she didn't have anything to say. I poured myself a drink from the minibar, opened the balcony door, and let the freezing mountain air hit me in the face. Don't cry here, I whispered to myself as I watched my breath disappear into the cold. Not here. Not for them. Christmas morning came with sunlight bouncing off the snow, and I woke up to 6 missed messages from the family group chat. There were pictures of my cousin's kids wearing matching pajamas, my aunt's dog dressed in a Santa hat, and one blurry photo of Mom holding a glass of orange juice. Still no direct message from my parents. Good. I got dressed, went downstairs, took a ski lesson, laughed with complete strangers, wiped out 3 times, and got right back up. For a few hours, I didn't think about my family at all. At 12:20 that morning, I was back in my room, with my hair still damp from the shower, scrolling through the photos I had taken. One picture caught my attention. It was me standing on the balcony with the mountains behind me, snow caught in my hair, wearing that ridiculous cashmere sweater. I looked happy. Not fake happy for a camera, not trying to prove anything, just genuinely quiet and content. I posted it to Instagram with a simple caption, Merry Christmas. I didn't add a location tag. At 12:34 p.m., my phone rang. Mom. I answered on the second ring. Hey, I said. Her voice sounded winded, like she had either been crying or rushing around the house. I could hear several voices murmuring behind her. Ethan, she said. And even through the phone, I could hear the anger hiding underneath the tremble in her voice. Are you in Wyoming? Yeah. You're in Jackson Hole? Her voice suddenly jumped an octave. On Christmas? Looks like it, I said. There was a murmur in the background, followed by a male voice. Ryan, put it on speaker. Someone else whispered, he posted it. Everyone's seen it. Mom came back on the line. Why didn't you tell us you were going on some extravagant trip? She snapped. Do you have any idea how this looks? Your father is sick to his stomach. I let out a short, almost disbelieving laugh. How it looks? Yes, she said, her voice rising. You're flaunting your money all over the internet while we're here dealing with... She suddenly stopped. Dealing with what? I asked. The line went quiet. Then Mom spoke more softly, almost like she was confessing something she couldn't believe she had to say. The dinner was canceled. Nobody could afford to host. And there it was. The truth had finally slipped through all the anger. For just a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. So let me make sure I understand this, I said, keeping my voice completely calm. You uninvited me from Christmas because, quote, your brother's fiancée doesn't want you there. Bad energy. And now you're upset because I'm not there paying for everything. Someone in the background sucked in a breath. You don't have to repeat it like that, Mom hissed. You know how Claire is. She's sensitive. We were going to work something out, but Ryan thought you'd offer to help like you always do. Then you post some luxury vacation picture online like you're rubbing it in our faces. I paused. Why would that be my problem? The line went completely silent. I could almost picture them in my parents' cramped living room. Everyone gathered around the phone on speaker, surrounded by half-wrapped presents and a Christmas dinner that apparently no one had been able to afford. Excuse me? Mom finally said. Why? I repeated. Why would that be my problem? "You're being cruel," she said, her voice shaking. "After everything we've done for you?" A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was sharp and almost bitter. "Everything you've done for me?" Someone in the background immediately whispered, "Turn off the speaker." That was Aunt Diane's voice. Then I heard another voice. "Ryan, he wants an audience." And suddenly I understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't just a phone call anymore, this was a stage. There were more than 40 relatives listening, probably half of them staring at my Instagram picture on their own phones and whispering about how much I had supposedly changed. My heart was pounding, but strangely, my hands were completely steady. "Okay," I said. "You want to talk about what everyone has done for everyone? Let's do that." "Ethan, this is not the time," Mom said. "It's Christmas." I almost smiled. "Funny," I said quietly. "That's exactly what I thought when you told me your son's fiancée didn't want me there because I'm bad energy." Someone gasped. Then I heard a child's voice in the background ask, "Mom, what's bad energy?" I pulled the phone away from my ear and switched the call over to FaceTime audio. Then I turned on the screen sharing option so they could see exactly what I was about to open. "Can everyone see my screen?" I asked. There was a brief pause. "Yeah," someone answered. "Good," I said. "Since we all care so much about how things look, I figured we should probably look at the whole picture." I heard a flurry of overlapping voices on their end, and I could actually hear the tone of the room change. It was the sound people make when they suddenly realize they aren't just listening to a conversation anymore. They were part of something much bigger. On my screen, my email was already open. At the top was a message from Marcus Webb, attorney at law. The subject line read, "Notice of change in financial support, effective December 5th. The PDF icon was sitting there on my screen, completely harmless looking. I tapped it, and the pages opened one after another. Everything was clean, organized, and brutally clear. "Ethan, stop," Mom said immediately. "You're making a scene." I took a breath. For once, yeah, I am. Then I scrolled to the summary page. "Let me read you something," I said, keeping my voice flat. June 2019. Mortgage arrears, $14,300 paid by Ethan Hayes, July 2019 through November 2024. Monthly mortgage payments of $2,400 paid by Ethan Hayes. Property taxes, insurance premiums, emergency roof repair, medical bills, holiday catering, down payment on Ryan and Claire's condo, $40,000. Every line had a date and a dollar amount next to it. I reached the bottom of the page and squinted at the total. The total comes to roughly $335,000. That's what I've contributed over the last 6 years. The living room on the other end of the call went silent. Not normal silence either. It was the kind of silence where nobody even knows what to say next. Someone finally whispered, "Oh my God, that has to be wrong." Mom started stumbling over her words. "We never asked you for that much. You didn't have to do all that." "Exactly," I said. "You asked for help over and over, and every time I said yes, it slowly became my responsibility. That's how we got here." "This is tacky," someone muttered. Then Claire's voice came from somewhere behind my mother. "Who keeps receipts on their own family?" I didn't hesitate. People who are tired of being told they're bad energy while they're the ones funding the room. Aunt Diane spoke up for the first time, and her voice was calm and clear. "Karen, I've seen some of those transfers. The numbers are real." "Diane, stay out of this," Mom snapped. I kept scrolling until I reached the final clause we had added. Effective December 5th, all financial support from Ethan Hayes to Karen and Robert Hayes ceases, with the exception of existing legal arrangements regarding property ownership. The recipients have 75 days from December 5th to assume full responsibility for all recurring payments or place the property on the market. Dad finally spoke, sounding like he had been underwater the entire conversation. "What does that mean?" "It means the house is legally in my name," I explained. "It has been since 2020 when you were about to lose it. You're listed as life tenants, so I'm not throwing you out. You can stay there. But if you can't cover the mortgage now that I'm no longer paying it, then you need to refinance or sell the property." Mom immediately broke down. These weren't quiet tears anymore. They were heavy, ugly sobs. "You would throw your own parents out on the street on Christmas?" "No," I said quietly. "I gave you 75 days. Most banks wouldn't give you anywhere near that much time. And I didn't stop paying because I wanted to punish you. I stopped because you told me I was bad for being in the room while I was the one paying to keep that room running." Ryan finally jumped in, his voice thick with frustration. "You could have talked to us, man. Instead, you blindsided us with some legal document." I laughed once, but there was nothing funny about it. "You mean the way you blindsided me by uninviting me because your fiancé doesn't like my vibe?" That shut him up. The line went silent again. "This isn't revenge," I said. forcing myself to slow down and choose each word carefully. "This is reality," Mom gasped. "You're overreacting. We were hurt." "You don't get to rewrite what happened to me," I cut in. "You wanted a Christmas without me. Congratulations, you got it. What you don't get is me quietly paying for the privilege of being excluded." The words landed hard. Nobody said anything. I took a breath, then softened my voice just enough to make sure they understood I wasn't trying to destroy them. "I'm not coming back to the role you wrote for me," I said. "The role where I bankroll everything, stay quiet, and accept being treated like I'm the problem. I'm done." Dad tried again. "Ethan, be reasonable. We're family. Being family isn't a license to use someone," I replied. "I'm not cutting off contact today. I'm just done funding dysfunction." Then I stopped the screen share. The document disappeared from their view and the PDF shrank back down on my phone. "I'm going to send this document to all of you," I said. "Read it. If you have questions, talk to Marcus. He's copied on the email. After today, if you want to talk to me, it won't be about money. And if you call me just to guilt me, scream at me, or pressure me into changing my mind, I won't answer. That's the boundary." "Ethan," Mom started. I interrupted gently. "I hope you still have a good Christmas." And the strange part was, I actually meant it. Then I ended the call. 12 minutes later, the first voicemail came through. "Ethan, it's Mom. How could you do that to us in front of everyone? Your father is—" I deleted it before she could finish. The second voicemail was from Ryan. "Bro, what? You embarrassed us. Claire's furious. You could have just talked to me. Delete." Then a text from Aunt Diane appeared. "Proud of you. Call me when you're ready. No pressure." I leaned back and let out a long breath as the tension finally started leaving my shoulders. Then I opened my email, added my parents' addresses, pasted in Marcus's formal wording, and hit send. The PDF went to my parents, Ryan and Aunt Diane. There was now a paper trail. No more arguments about what I had supposedly promised or who remembered what. Everything was in writing. The days after Christmas felt strangely similar to recovering from a long illness. My phone kept lighting up with calls, texts, and what I started thinking of as guilt grenades. Mom sent me a huge message about how unfair it was to put a price tag on love. I didn't respond. Ryan tried a different approach. "Look, man, Claire feels attacked. She didn't mean bad energy like that. You know how she talks." I stared at the screen before replying. "She meant it enough to get me uninvited." There was a long pause. Then Ryan wrote, "We just thought you'd step up like always. Money doesn't mean that much to you?" I stared at that sentence until the words practically blurred together. Money doesn't mean that much to you. Right. Because I had worked incredibly hard, and somehow my family had started confusing sacrifice with unlimited abundance. I finally answered, "It means enough that I'm not giving it to people who resent me for having it." I watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, then appear again. Finally, Ryan sent one more message. "So, you're done helping us financially?" "Yes." He never replied. On January 6th, my parents' bank contacted them about the missed December payment and the upcoming January payment. The next day, January 7th, Mom left me a voicemail in a voice I barely recognized. She sounded broken and small. "Ethan," she said, "we can't afford the payment. We thought you'd change your mind. Can't you at least keep helping with the house? We'll figure out the rest. We don't want to lose it." I sat at my kitchen counter with the phone on speaker, staring at the envelope beside me that contained my spare key to their house. I remembered exactly how Mom had sounded when she told me, "Your brother's fiancée doesn't want you there. Bad energy." I remembered the tone, the certainty, the way she had said it, as if my feelings didn't even factor into the decision. I picked up my phone and called Marcus instead. "I'm not backing out," I told him, "but I don't want them homeless. Can we structure a sale that keeps them safe?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "You cover the closing costs. They walk away with something. You walk away with your boundary intact. Let's do it." So we put the house on the market in late January. I handled everything as professionally as I would have for any other client. There was no family discount, no petty commentary, and no attempt to embarrass them. When the for sale sign went into the yard, Mom sent me a picture with no caption. I looked at it, then put my phone down. I didn't respond. Instead, I texted Aunt Diane. "They listed the house today." She replied almost immediately. "I know. Your mom is telling everyone you forced her." Then she added, "People who have eyes know the truth." A moment later, another message came through. "You didn't force them. Consequences did." After that, I changed the relevant access codes, canceled the cards I had been paying for, and stopped reacting to every message. Mom eventually sent another long email about how money had made me cold. I replied once, "I'm no longer available to be blamed for problems I was only expected to fix." Then I muted the thread. And what remained after all that wasn't anger. It was space, free weekends, a quieter phone. And for the first time in my life, proof that I didn't have to keep shrinking myself just to make everyone else comfortable.